Lost my life savings due to a ghost by Austin Murre. October 23rd, 2023. Before I tell you what happened, or rather, what's happening, I need to give you some background information about me and my family. Schizophrenia runs in the family on my mother's side, both of her parents. Suicide, although not an inheritable condition, is also surprisingly high in the Nichol-Jones family. My mother always warned me against drugs because she said it could kickstart mental problems that could not be undone. So I was a teetotaler all my life. Even before I knew my family's history, I always felt unsafe when alone. When I was just a child, I always had the feeling that there was something standing right behind me. The skin on my back would vibrate, and I would become aware of every sound around me. This feeling carried over from Duplo, then Lego, then video games, and finally it dissolved away somewhere around the age of 14. I had matured out of it, I thought. Despite the overwhelming feeling of eyes on me, I always attributed my discomfort to an overactive imagination. My puberty was thereafter free from the paranormal paranoia that plagued my youth, and I could focus on my other woes, such as my undiagnosed dweeb syndrome, as a fellow student once pointed out. Joke's on him. I make more money in a month than he does in a year now, not to brag. I spend a lot of time working on myself. While my roommates partied and smoked weed, I spent my time either in the gym or behind the computer. All those parties I skipped paid off because I could afford to buy my home outright at the age of 25, much to the surprise of my ex-roommates. I did that a week ago. It's not a big place, nor is it modern, but it's in nature, and I prefer that to downtown. It's an old white 2-story house in the outskirts of Phoenix, without another building in sight. Just rolling hills of low cacti and succulents, all under the dry desert heat and pink sunset skies. The house is unremarkable, other than the fact that it's lonesome, despite looking like a copy-paste suburban home. It even has a perfectly trimmed emerald green lawn that halts at a knee-high white fence on the edge of the property. The water bill was going to be high to keep all that grass healthy, but money isn't an issue. So anyway, the first thing I did when arriving was installing an internet antenna on the roof, which took all but an hour or so. Then I set up a home office in what appeared to be a kid's bedroom. The room was barren, like all others, but this one had some of those glow-in-the-dark stars adhesive stickers on the ceiling. Those could be scraped off later. Setting up my workstation was the most immediate task at hand. It never rained in Phoenix, so I just flung some Cat 8 cables from the antenna over the outside wall and in through the window of the kid's bedroom. There were 2 more bedrooms, one of which I would turn into my home gym. The other would be my master bedroom. The gym equipment was scheduled to arrive in a week. Until then, I would happily go jogging. So after booting up my PC, I laced up my shoelaces and began my jog over the asphalt road that connected my beautiful home to the rest of the world. By now, the sun hung low in the sky, and I ran towards the beautiful pink heavens while jamming to some tunes and singing the lyrics as loud as I wanted. At that moment, without another soul in sight, I felt truly free. It was dusk by the time I returned. The lights in my house were off, other than the alternating, colorful glow of my computer rig in the upper left window. After a quick shower, I wrapped a towel around my waist and jumped behind my PC. With the lights off, headphones on, and screens bright, I melted into work mode. I'm not going to tell you what I do exactly. All I can really tell you is that I'm a contractor who signed an NDA. It's a good gig if you can handle it. It does require expertise and the ability for deep concentration. But these are both things I had cultivated. I could probably write a thesis in the middle of a water balloon fight. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that you couldn't distract me if you tried. However, as I was working, I gradually became aware of an odd feeling. One that I couldn't place at first. It felt as though, while I was working, a strange and ancient anxiety crept up from the floor, slowly from legs to my neck. A vibration that hummed the entire part of the back of my body until I finally had to give it my attention. Shivering, I cast my eyes back into my barren room, seeing only those glowing stars on the ceiling. I assumed, since the window was open and the desert heat had turned, that I was simply cold. I decided to go downstairs and unpack a fresh set of clothes from one of the boxes. But as I turned away from my screens, I felt that old feeling grow. Usually, looking back over my shoulder gave me a momentary relief. A relief that lasted little more than a few seconds, but something that at least told my logical mind that there was nothing to worry about. This time, however, the feeling grew with each step towards the door. I was on noodle legs by the time the lights turned on. I thought I had gone hypothermic or something, but no. That's impossible because I was sweating like a madman. Then I thought I might have rubbed against some kind of toxic plant while jogging. But I'm an avid hiker, and I had never heard of anything that could cause this kind of reaction. There was no escaping my reality. There was no running from myself. I was afraid. Not just afraid, I was absolutely terror-stricken. That old feeling I had forgotten, suddenly, like a raging current, came back into my world. I was unprepared. Telling myself that there was no such thing as ghosts did very little. I knew that my fear was irrational, yet that knowledge did little to alleviate this feeling. When I was a kid, I had protocols with myself to manage this. Protocols my parents helped me develop. What did I do? I forced myself to think of the worst possible monsters I could, to override the fear of the unknown. I imagined myself as a confident, fierce, and unwavering warrior. You know, the kind of warrior who doesn't have to run up the stairs after turning the basement light off. So I did what I did as an 8-year-old, except now I wasn't a nose-picking, helpless little brat. Now I was the handsome, 200 pounds lean sex machine. I was also wearing nothing but a towel and indoor slippers. But that wasn't going to stop me from sauntering through this house, my house, no matter what I felt. If my lizard brain wanted to feed my body adrenaline and activate its fight or flight response, then it was first going to have to deal with my monkey brain, which was arguably in charge, more or less. I grabbed the handle with shaking intensity and flung the door wide open, exposing my bare chest and hard nipples to the oppressive sheet of darkness that was an unlit, unfamiliar home. To my left, there were the other upstairs rooms. The railing to my right overlooked the bottom floor by the front door. On the far end of the hallway were the stairs, which was also where the light switch was located. Try as I might, I simply couldn't force myself to do a casual strut. Instead, I did a nervous, robotic march. Like a plastic soldier, I made my way for the light switch. With an exultant snap, the light sprang on, and a long-held breath escaped my chest. However, something strange happened. It all happened in a fraction of a second. The only way I can explain it was that the light replaced the darkness as though it were a liquid, as though the light pushed the darkness into the corners, where it drained into the plaster. And in that fraction of a second, I heard a stifled breath. I stood there, frozen, other than the sweep of my eyes. That old feeling left, and instead I stood like a shaking shell of a man. It took me 20 minutes to finally move. The only motivation was running down to the fridge, which had nothing but a cold 6-pack. Along the way, I turned on every light in the house. I then climbed to the roof with my bruise and sat there in contemplation. Only when twilight broke did I retreat to my bed, with the lights on. October 24th, 2023. I'm a night owl. I usually sleep from early morning to afternoon, so this hadn't affected my rhythm, and in fact, the anxiety was almost forgotten by the time I awoke. Full of bursting excitement, I began unpacking my boxes and decorating my house. So far, most of the house was empty, but my office and bedroom were quickly covered in nerdy memorabilia. Since there were no neighbors, I put my speakers on the windowsill and turned them outward. My experiment was to see how far the sound would carry during my daily jog. I call it an experiment, but really I just wanted to feel like I owned the world. Around the same time as yesterday, I laced up my sneakers and exited my home. After a quick stretch, I used my phone to start the tunes. To hear my favorite beats travel over this desert was a treat, like there was a concert just for me. Hell yeah, I exclaimed while starting my jog. A genre called dark western was always my jam, otherwise affectionately named emo yeehaw by other fans. By the time I was on my way back, Heathens by Valley of Wolves was playing, and I sang unapologetically while nearing my home under the dusk sky. This time, all the lights were on full blast. The inside of my house was bright as day, which was fine. The energy bill meant nothing to me. Much like last night, I jumped behind my computer wearing nothing but a towel as I air dried. After a few hours of deep work, I had completed all my tasks and ordered some food. Nearly every restaurant said my property was outside of their service area. Ultimately, I found an Indian restaurant that agreed to bring it with a $35 compensation for delivery fees. Even I thought that was expensive, so I did something ingenious. I ordered 20 meals, averaging the delivery cost down to $1.75. I put on some clothes and ran downstairs to turn on the rice cooker. While in the kitchen, that strange feeling crept up on me again. Scanning my dining room, I noticed that the lights were turned off, despite the fact that I could clearly remember turning them on. I remember because it was the only room in the house with a dimmer switch, and I imagined romantic dinners with future partners there. The anxiety was less intense, but more directed, if that makes sense. Whereas last night I felt a general discomfort, now I felt my senses spike in the direction of the dark dining room. Wanting to avoid repeating the strange panic attack, I immediately marched towards the dark. I thought turning the lights on would alleviate my stress. That was not true. From the corner of my eye, I saw something move behind the curtains. Although it was a mere glimpse, it was human in shape, like someone was trying to hide from me. "Hey!" I shouted as a reaction, trying to sound brave despite the fact that it scared the shit out of me. "Who's there?" The IKEA table hadn't been assembled yet, but the parts lay organized on the floor. That was supposed to be this evening's project. One of the table legs became my blunt instrument of self-defense as I slowly approached the hanging curtains. I assumed that a meth head had broken in, and I wasn't going to risk anything. So, without warning, I swung the table leg with as much force as I could against the curtain. I was under the assumption that I would hear a meaty thud and cries for mercy, but no. Just the sound of wood versus soft cloth. Surprised, I held my weapon high and ripped the curtain to the side, only to find emptiness. "What the fuck?" I muttered under my breath. I knew for certain that something was there. Or rather, I knew for certain that I had seen something. Immediately, I wondered if my family's schizophrenia had been passed down to me. Ghosts and monsters never scared me because I never believed any of it. What scared me was my own mind. That horrified me as a child, because I knew that was real. At any moment, my mind could betray me and start casting my worst fears into the world. I decided not to despair just yet. Instead, I resolved to ignoring my symptoms like a real man and began assembling my IKEA furniture. 3 chairs and 1 table later, a soft click sounded. Although it was barely on the fringes of audible, the sound was unmistakable. It was a light switch upstairs. This time, I grabbed the unfinished 4th chair as a weapon before peeking my head out of the dining room. The lights were on, much to my relief, but I still felt compelled to investigate. After a tactical sweep of the house, I concluded that it had been the bathroom light. As far as I was concerned, there were 3 possible situations at hand. 1, I'm losing my mind, which was possible. 2, the house is haunted, which is nonsense. 3, there is some fault with the electrical layout, which was the most likely. This time, I stood alert and ready as the lights snapped on, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. Relieved by the lack of paranormal activity, I descended the stairs again when I heard a loud knock. I let out a yelp and jumped the last 10 steps, the unfinished chair clattering down behind me. "Hello?" I heard an Indian accent from my front door. I opened the door and found a delivery man from Tandoori Corner holding up a cardboard box. "Did you order 20 butter chicken?" he asked. "Yes, and 1 garlic naan." "That will be $455.37. "Would you mind sticking around a little while?" I asked him suddenly. Before he could respond, I continued, "I have a new co-op game and no one to play with. I'll tip you an extra $50 for every level you complete with me." "Are you serious?" 100%. He stared at me for a moment, perhaps wondering if I was a serial killer. After a long silence, I said, "I'll even give you some butter chicken." "Deal." The only PC game I knew to have split screen was called Project Zomboid, and it was one of my all-time favorites. He definitely saw that my account was tallied at over 3,000 hours, indicating that I was anything but new. He quickly discovered it wasn't a game with levels, so we just decided on $100 an hour pay for him to play with me. I think he thought I was just lonely, living out in the outskirts at the end of an empty road. I wasn't, but some company was appreciated. Despite the fact that we had a boatload of fun, that wasn't my goal. If anything strange were to happen and we both saw it, I would know that I wasn't losing my mind. It took all but a half hour before that creeping anxiety began seeping in. I looked over at Rajesh to see if he was feeling uncomfortable, but no. He was deeply focused. My palms became clammy and I could feel my heart pounding. Try as I might, I simply couldn't hide my discomfort. "Are you okay?" Rajesh asked. "You're hyperventilating." I began to speak when suddenly all the lights in the house turned off. The screen went black and we were cast into an abyss. I heard a terrible, horrible shriek that split my eardrums. It was Rajesh. In turn, he startled me and I shrieked. I then heard the pitter-patter of his escape and followed close behind him, both still screaming. When the door opened and the moonlight flooded in, it seemed a heavenly glow of salvation. Rajesh bolted for his electric bike and started pedaling like an Olympian. "Wait," I shouted, "what about your tip?" "Keep it!" Outside, my anxiety was tame, but my sense still burned in the direction of that gaping, open doorway. At the very least, I knew I wasn't hallucinating, which wasn't much of a relief. What the hell was going on in my house? Immediately, I started calling Ronnie Talahas, the guy I bought the house from. We had met in a bar down in Atlanta, where he was visiting his mom. Told me she was sick and he was planning to move. Said his house in Phoenix was already empty and about to go up for sale. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, I had bought the house from him. I was wondering why the house was so cheap after seeing its perfect condition. Ronnie just had a really good sob story, and I thought I could take advantage of this opportunity. He must have known this place was haunted, or something of the like. Maybe there's a gas leak causing irrational thought, paired with faulty electrical infrastructure. Despite the fact that it was past midnight, I started calling him and leaving messages, demanding an answer. I stood there for hours until daylight illuminated my house. When that happened, I took a few careful steps inside and felt no anxiety. After a deep breath, I assembled my last dining chair and retreated to my mattress at 8 o'clock in the morning. October 25th, 2023. I awoke at 12:45, which was early, but my night had been plagued by restless dreams. I spent the next 20 minutes calling and texting Ronnie with no response. His profile picture had been removed and the call would go straight to a generic voicemail. "What the fuck?" I shouted before jumping behind the computer. "Ronnie Talahas, you asshole. You have no idea who you're messing with." Let's make something clear. I'm not your average guy. I have access to records and databases that would make marketing companies cream themselves. Every conversation and document ever exchanged between me and Ronnie was pulled up, and after installing my fourth monitor, I began my investigation. He had sold the house directly to me because he was a real estate agent and was licensed to do all the technical stuff. All the documents seemed legit, but I couldn't find a single mention of him. The account that I had forwarded the money to was linked to a US enclave for a Nigerian company. The Nigerian company filed for bankruptcy in 2013, yet due to some bureaucratic oversight, the bank account was still in use. Obviously, this was all very, very strange, but I owned the deed to the house. I had all the official paperwork, unless all of that was fake. Oh shit, I muttered as I made way for the garage. I wasn't sure where I was going. City Hall, perhaps, but I knew I had to go and figure out what the hell was happening. I jumped into my Mustang and started her up. The garage door lifted and I pressed the pedal to the metal, expecting to hear my tires screech against the concrete. But no, it was only a pathetic flubber sound. The tire was flat. Are you kidding me? I slammed the door shut and grabbed my bike pump, grumbling at the fact that it was going to take an hour. However, I stood baffled when I noticed that all tires were flat. And upon closer inspection, it seemed they had been slashed by some large, crude machete. How was that possible? I couldn't even be angry, I was too dumbfounded. Defeated, I slumped into a chair in my dining room. Something was amiss. Maybe I was doing this to myself and didn't even remember. But would that even cross my mind if I was schizophrenic? How self-aware are crazy people? Do they have bouts of sanity? If I were to call people, would they get worried and have me sent to an asylum? I'm obviously losing my mind. It was 19:30 at that point, lunchtime. So I grabbed some butter chicken and went back to my computer. Try as I might, I simply couldn't make sense of it all. Maybe I should call a psychiatrist. Maybe I should get some meds and then these strange occurrences would stop. Maybe my whole life was an illusion. The degree of self-awareness in psychosis is not binary. Rather, it falls on a spectrum. Some individuals may retain a significant level of awareness and acknowledge their condition. In contrast, others may have diminished self-awareness, experiencing difficulty in recognizing their symptoms as part of an illness, said an article. As I was researching, I felt the anxiety return. This time was going to be different. I was going to sit there no matter what. I'm a grown-ass man, goddammit. I'm not supposed to be afraid of the dark. With speakers turned all the way up, my brightness to the max, and a gas-powered pellet pistol on my desk, I felt ready for anything. If I could power through this darkness-induced panic attack, then I would conquer it. My illogical lizard brain might learn that there was nothing to fear. With gritting teeth and thumping temples, I continued my research. Even when hallway lights spontaneously flickered off, even when I felt a malevolent presence and cold breeze, I maintained my concentration on my screen. I refused to give in to my childish fear of the dark. I refused to peek over my shoulder and into the corners of my room, illuminated by my 4 monitors. I refused, but failed when something brushed up against my leg. Thank you guys for listening. I hope to see you next week for part 2 of Lost My Life Savings Due to a Ghost. This story was submitted to me by Austin Murre, and if you have a story that you'd like to hear narrated on the channel, feel free to email me, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye.